Hi everyone, let's talk about psychological defense mechanisms and find out which one do you often use. We all have thoughts, feelings, impulses, and memories that can be challenging. Often we deal with difficult feelings by applying psychological defense mechanisms. While defense mechanisms can be unhealthy, they can also be adaptive and allow us to function normally depending on their severity, their inflexibility, and the context in which they occur. Defense mechanism is an unconscious reaction pattern to protect us from being flooded by anxiety, threats to self-esteem, and things that we do not want to think about or deal with. Now, let's talk about some of the most common defense mechanisms. Reaction formation. Reaction formation is converting of unwanted or dangerous thoughts, feelings, or impulses into their opposites. For example, an individual who is very angry with his manager and would like to quit his job may instead be overly kind towards his manager. He is incapable of expressing the negative emotions of anger and unhappiness with his job, and instead becomes overly kind to publicly demonstrate that he is not feeling angry and unhappy. Regression. Regression is the reversion to an earlier stage of development in the face of unacceptable thoughts or impulses. Stress of adult life and anxiety may lead to a person seeking comfort in things which they associate with more secure, happier times. They might regress by eating meals that they were given as a child, watching old movies or cartoons, acting without thought for the consequences of their actions. Projection. Projection is the misattribution of a person's undesired thoughts, feelings, or impulses onto another person who does not have those thoughts, feelings, or impulses. Projection is used especially when the thoughts are considered unacceptable for the person to express, or they feel completely ill at ease with having them. For example, a spouse may be angry at their significant other for not listening, when in fact it is the angry spouse who does not listen. Projection is often the result of a lack of insight and acknowledgement of one's own motivations and feelings. Displacement. Displacement involves a person feeling that they cannot express a negative emotion toward a particular person, so they direct those negative emotions towards someone else. People often use displacement when they cannot express their feelings in a safe manner to the person they are directed at. The classic example is the man who gets angry at his boss but can't express his anger to his boss for fear of being fired. He instead comes home, starts an argument with his wife. The man is redirecting his anger from his boss to his wife. Naturally, this is a pretty ineffective defense mechanism because while the anger finds a route for expression, its misapplication to other harmless people or objects will cause additional problems for most people. Intellectualization. Intellectualization works to reduce anxiety by thinking about events in a cold, clinical way. The defense mechanism allows us to avoid thinking about the stressful, emotional aspects of the situation and instead focus only on the intellectual component. By taking emotions out of painful situations, intellectualization makes them easier to deal with. Rationalization. Rationalization is when an individual offers an incorrect explanation for his or her unacceptable behavior or feelings and avoiding the true underlying reasons. For example, a person who is turned down for a date might rationalize the situation by saying they were not attracted to other person anyway. Rationalizing an event may help individuals maintain self-respect or avoid guilt over something they have done wrong. Acting out. Acting out is performing an extreme behavior in order to express thoughts or feelings the person feels incapable of otherwise expressing. A person who acts out may instead throw a book at the person or punch a hole through a wall. A child's temper tantrum is a form of acting out when he or she doesn't get his or her way with a parent. Denial. Denial is the refusal to accept reality or fact, acting as if a painful event, thought or feeling did not exist. Many people use denial in their everyday lives to avoid dealing with painful feelings or areas of their life they don't wish to admit. For instance, a person who is abusing alcohol but high functioning will often simply deny they have a drinking problem, pointing to how well they function in their job and relationships. Sublimation. During sublimation, uncomfortable feelings and thoughts transform when a person chooses to take the energy behind these feelings and thoughts and put it towards a different, constructive purpose. For example, Mary is mad at her father, but instead of yelling at him, she's going to paint a picture or to go for a workout. Distraction. Distraction means of consciously deciding to put off thinking or feeling distressing thoughts or feelings by temporarily focusing your attention towards something less threatening. For example, Mary can't sleep for worry about whether the test will show she has an illness. Instead, she turns on the TV for a while so that she can get her mind off that negative track. Altruism. Altruism refers to acts of selfless goodwill towards other people. Some people use altruism as a defense mechanism. When faced with uncomfortable feelings, thoughts, and impulses, they cope with these feelings by helping others going through similar difficulties or feelings, but are who less capable to deal with those. Doing so helps them to keep themselves under control and also makes them feel good about themselves. Compensation. The term compensation refers to a type of defense mechanism in which people overachieve in one area to compensate for failures in another. For instance, when a person says, "I may not know how to cook, but I can sure do the dishes," they're trying to compensate for their lack of cooking skills by emphasizing their cleaning skills instead. When done appropriately and not in an attempt to overcompensate, compensation is a defense mechanism that helps reinforce a person's self-esteem and self-image. Repression. Repression is the unconscious blocking of unacceptable thoughts, feelings, and impulses. The key to repression is that people do it unconsciously, so they often have very little control over it. For an example, an individual suffers a nasty spider bite as a child and develops an intense phobia of spiders later in life without any recollection of the experience as a child. It is important to note that repression is more complex than trying to avoid or forget about something that is called suppression. So, suppression is a conscious form of repression. You choose to not engage or talk about distressing feelings or thoughts. You are aware of them and not intimidated by them overly, but just decide to put off dealing with them for a while. For an example, Amy is mad at her mom, but it won't help to tell her that at this family party. She will save this revelation for a time when they can speak about it privately. Although they are easily confused, repression and suppression are two different things. Repression is an unconscious forgetting to the point that they do not know it exists, whereas suppression is a deliberate and purposeful pushing away of thoughts, memories, or feelings out of conscious awareness. However, this distinction between suppression and repression is not quite so clear-cut. For many of us, any situation that brings uncertainty triggers an unconscious protective measure that allows us to cope with unpleasant emotions can be helpful. So sometimes tapping into defense mechanisms can be useful. Now, let us know below in comments what is your psychological defense mechanism and which one do you often use.